Hello, and welcome to the Point Church podcast. We're really glad you're here. Before we jump in, if you'd like to stay connected, you can download the Point Church app. It's a simple way to find messages, resource, and what's happening. And if this podcast is helpful, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. Let's get into today's episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Point Church podcast. Today we're here with Pastor Sam, and we're going to be doing 40 days, 40 podcasts through the book of Matthew. We're going to be starting today in Matthew 1, verses 1 through 17. This is a big part that usually people skip. As we know in church. And so we thought, what a better way than to tell you why it is a big reason to read it. And I'm going to hand it over to Pastor Sam here.
Yeah. So we did this with a reading plan that'll break up the 28 chapters over 40 days. And so this is where you'll start is in Matthew chapter 1. And this is the first chapter of the New Testament. And, you know, when you read the Bible for the first time, you're like, what are we doing? With this, you should start in the New Testament. A lot of people like start in Genesis, but you should start in the New Testament. But if you start in the New Testament, what you start with is a list of names, and it kind of begs the question, like, what's with all these names? Why are we doing this? So I think a way that could be helpful to understand is the writer, Matthew, is saying to you as the reader, in some ways, this is a recap of what you've already heard, what you've read from the Old Testament. So an example I've used before is almost like when you're going to a new season of a show and it's been a few years since it's come out, like Stranger Things or something, you know, you're like, it's been a few years and these kids aren't kids anymore, but like what happened? I kind of forgot what happened in the past seasons. And they always have that recap video.
Yeah.
It's kind of a recap before the intro of the new season. In many ways, this is what this is. So it's like, it goes all the way back to Abraham. And that's like when God first lays out his covenant to say, hey, like through you, through your faith, through your family, I'm going to bless the whole world, but I'm going to send someone specific that's going to redeem the whole world. So in a way, it's kind of a recap. And then as you go further, you have names on the list that you recognize from the Old Testament that you're like, oh yeah, like Isaac was a big deal. Jacob was a big deal. We have, people like King David in here. We have Solomon, and then we have a list of these kings that came after King David. And then it breaks it up into 3 different areas. So you have 42 generations, 14 in each of the 3 categories that you have from Abraham to David. You have David to the Babylonian exile, and then the Babylonian exile all the way up to Jesus. So what Matthew is saying is, you know, this is God's flesh and blood child that came from this family, this royal family, but he's also the promised one. He's the fulfillment of everything you've read up to this point, but he's doing it in a quick way. Essentially, he's basically summarizing the Old Testament in a quick way.
So, like, when you read through this, right, if you're a new believer or whatever, a lot of these names make absolutely zero sense.
Yeah, like at first you feel good because you're like, I've heard of Abraham and maybe Isaac and Jacob, but then you get down into Jehoshaphat, Joram, and Uzziah, and you're like, boy, I'm totally lost.
Yeah, so, like, what would you tell, like, someone who's first reading this?
Yeah.
Like, what would you say, like, when these names come up? Because sometimes, you know, like, as you're reading, if, like, you don't know words, sometimes they can make you not want to read anymore.
Yeah, you just want to give up.
Exactly. So, like, when you read these lists of names and you're not, you might have not gone to seminary or you maybe not even read the Old Testament.
Yeah.
How would you tell them, why is this important to them instead of just skipping over?
I would say there is a movie, not movie, there's a directorial decision called in media res. And you're going to be like, wow, that's a fancy term. It's not. It just means you start the story in the beginning or in the middle. A lot of movies do this. They kind of like drop you in the middle of the war scene. They drop you in the middle of an ER and you're like, what the heck's happening? Like, what's all this stuff? Who are these characters? And then they almost go back and recap. In some ways, that's what this is because you're like, I don't know who Solomon is.
Yeah.
I don't know, but he's a character in here, clearly. A lot of TV shows do this. And then as you read you're like,
Mm.
oh, that's who that guy was. So like you will get allusions to King David as you keep going through the
Mhm.
New Testament. You're going to hear about him a fair amount. You're going to hear a lot about Abraham. You're
Mhm.
like, oh, this seems to be an important guy. So
Mhm.
even if you don't know these people like characters, you recognize they are important because they keep coming up over and over. So what my encouragement would to be is to say, first and foremost, these are people. Think of them as characters, and if that helps you to think of it like a story, don't think of it like a textbook. It's
Yeah.
not meant to be a textbook.
Yeah.
They're not terms to memorize per se. These are real
Mhm.
people's lives,
Mhm.
and they're people that you can read about in the Old Testament. And what I love about the Bible is it treats real people like real people.
Yeah.
So it doesn't sugarcoat it. Like you can go and read Abraham, the first one. You're like, oh, this guy must have been awesome. Well,
Mhm.
kinda. Like he has
Yeah.
great moments, but he also like messes up a lot.
Yeah.
David messed up a lot. At one point, right here in verse 6, like as you begin from David to the exile, it says, David fathered Solomon by Uriah's wife.
Mm.
If you're just skipping over that, you're like, well, who's Uriah?
Yeah.
David got some other dude's wife
Pregnant.
pregnant? And you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, he did. Like,
Mm.
and Matthew put that right there, not to necessarily shame
Mhm.
the woman. He's like, it's actually on David, this man of God who like
Yeah.
had this affair. And so
Mhm.
Matthew he's not pulling punches. He's not cleaning up the family tree. A lot of
Mhm.
times if we're in maybe like elementary school and we do that family tree for the first time,
Yeah.
you're like, oh, can we like leave weird Uncle Rick or whatever like off the tree?
Yeah.
Because you know what I mean, we just don't
Yeah.
talk about him. He doesn't do that. He puts
No,
them
he
all
puts
in
it.
there and specifically points out Uriah's wife that you're like,
Yeah.
what? And then you're like, wait, what? And you go back and you read that story and you're like, David not only took this woman, had an affair with her, and then had the guy killed in order to marry her, and then you find out Uriah is one of his best friends.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, that's far more interesting than thinking of it like a textbook of like,
Yeah.
well, I need to know who Ahaz is. Well, you'll get there, but like,
Mhm.
what you need to know is that these are stories, these are names, and some of them are horrible, horrible people, and some of them are amazing people
Mhm.
that followed God passionately, but it's a very mixed bag, and Jesus shows up in this very mixed up family.
So when you're looking at this, right?
Mm-hmm.
He starts out with all of this, but maybe give us some of the context of where Matthew is when
Mm-hmm.
he's writing this out, and like, I mean,
Yeah.
you've kind of explained like why he's doing it, but
Yeah.
kind of like where is he? Because you turn that book from uh Malachi, right to
Mm-hmm.
the New Testament.
Yep.
Why does it start in Matthew? Where is
Yeah.
Matthew?
So each of the Gospels, which is
Hmm.
just a word for the
Yep.
biographies of Jesus,
Hmm.
Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all have a different take on them.
Hmm.
Matthew is doing this intentionally to point to Jesus as like the new king.
Mm.
So let's think about it like this. If you or I like just lost our mind and said, I am the king of England. We just came into church and said, hey, I don't know why you're talking about Sam. I'm the king of England.
Mm.
They'd be like, you're crazy.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, this is like a common thing that ends up with people in a nut house
Yeah.
saying like, I'm the king of England, because no one's ever like, I'm a peasant. It's always, they're
Yeah.
important. They're a king. This proves it, that Jesus wasn't walking
Mm.
around saying, I'm a king
Mhm.
with no proof.
Yeah.
If there was a new baby that was born in the royal family this week
Mhm.
over in England, it would be worldwide news,
Mhm.
because everyone's been tracking this family lineage, not just like in tabloids, but everyone's been tracking this family lineage for hundreds, thousands of years.
Yeah.
We always do this as a society. Like every culture tracks like royal line. And in
Mhm.
many ways, that's what Matthew is doing. He's like, here's the royal line all the way back to Abraham, and you can chart it. And then you're like, oh, we read about this in the Old Testament.
Mhm.
And then, but the family tree continues after the exile in verse 12, when things still got messy and everything got
Mhm.
decimated in Israel, but they're going back to their home country. He's like, hey, we still kept records. You can look these up. You can pull the files.
Mm.
Jesus was born into this family, and it's been
Yeah.
verified by the Romans. It was verified by the Jewish people because they kept these records. So you're like,
Yeah.
he's not just the carpenter's son. He is of royal lineage.
Yeah. And it kind of flips like, when you think of the royal family, you think of like this pristine, perfect
Yeah.
family. But right here in this lineage, you can go through, and like one that could stick out to people is Ruth, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
you're like, so you're telling me Jesus came from Ruth?
Yes. Like a lot of times you would think like, if you come from a royal family, like it's almost like, again, I'm using other examples, but Harry Potter, they talk about purebloods.
Exactly. Yeah.
You'd think, oh, there's a pureblood, but
Yeah.
then you have Ruth there. Ruth is not Jewish. Like she
Yep.
was not an
Nope.
Israelite, but she was a person of great faith
Mm-hmm.
who followed her mother-in-law and,
Mm-hmm.
remained loyal to her.
Yeah.
And God honored that
Mm-hmm.
and allowed her to have a family that grew in Bethlehem.
Yep.
And her grandson or great grandson was David.
Mm-hmm.
So, but she is mentioned here as someone who's definitely not a pureblood by the
Yeah.
way that we would think of it. So it's like, so clearly God is communicating through Matthew to us that this is like Abraham founded the faith, but
Mm-hmm.
what founded the faith or the family is that he trusted God.
Yeah.
And that was the criteria.
Yeah.
And so in many ways, God's like, I'm more than looking for who your lineage is. Like, yes, like that matters. But I'm also looking for, are you faithful?
Yeah.
Do you want to be in my family tree? And
Mm-hmm.
that's really what Jesus does is he's like, come join my family, the family
Yeah.
I'm building.
And so with Jesus, like coming from this lineage of, very important people that really like are just kind of
Some
whatever
get like one sentence in the
mix.
Old Testament.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like some get one sentence, one are very bad, some are crazy, like
Yeah.
all this lineage. Like some people would look on the outside and be like, okay, so your Lord and Savior comes from this messed up place and everything else.
Yeah.
But why is that so important to us to see the example of that?
I think it's so important because who among us, one, comes from a perfect family?
Mm-hmm.
If you do, you're lying. Two, who comes from a perfect life?
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody. Like,
Nobody. No.
and I think what again is being communicated is if you go back and read, like again, the recap
Yeah.
of the Old Testament, and you're like, oh, Jesus comes from murderers, adulterers, he comes from thieves, he comes from idolaters, he comes from people like there's a king mentioned in here who literally sacrifices his son in an altar fire.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so he comes from these people of deep, deep evil,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not their goodness
No.
that Jesus comes for. It's that Jesus redeems even the worst of us. And so no matter who you are, you can find yourself in this
Mm-hmm.
lineage saying, "Oh, I've done that. I've been guilty of this too." And Jesus still comes, and Jesus is still willing to be not only a part of our story, but he's willing to bring us into his family.
Yeah, it kind of, like you said, anyone could pick out someone in this lineage and be
Mhm.
like, "Oh, I've done that."
Yeah.
And
If
so,
we're being honest with
if
ourselves.
we're
Yeah.
honest, yeah. And it's like Jesus is showing us the example
Yeah.
before even arriving through his lineage.
Exactly.
And that's how amazing God works.
Yep.
In that. And so, with that, we don't want to get too far ahead for tomorrow.
Yeah,
We're
we
gonna
got
be
some exciting stuff coming,
we're gonna be picking up tomorrow.
like a Christmas massacre and a
Yeah.
bunch of stuff.
It's gonna be fun. So thanks for tuning in, everyone, and we'll see you next time.